Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2019 edition of Law, Justice, and Development Week. In just a minute, we're going to kick it off with a keynote entitled Leveraging Innovations for Rights and Justice, featuring our distinguished speakers, Mr. Ahmed Ashkar, founder and CEO of the Hult Prize Foundation, and Peggy Hicks, the Director of Thematic Engagement, Special Procedures, and Right to Development Division with the Office of High Commission for Human Rights. That's a mouthful. Today's discussion will be moderated by Denis Robitaille, the World Bank Group Vice President and Chief Information Officer. And please note that this session is being broadcast on World Bank Live across the world. And for those of you in the room, we encourage you to join the conversation online using hashtag LJDWeek2019 on your preferred social media channels. We'll share your comments and questions with the speakers as they go up. And now we'll hear a few introductory remarks from the Senior Vice President and Group General Counsel, Sandy Okoro, followed by the World Bank Group President, David Malpass. Please welcome me in joining Sandy Okoro to the stage.
Good morning, everybody. Before I start the formalities, I just want to do this. Now, I know we have many visitors from all over the world, and they might be wondering what I'm doing. So let me just explain. The Nats won. Woo! They won the World Series, first time since 1924, and a once-in-a-lifetime experience, a bit like LJD Week. So I just want us all to give another round of applause to the home team. That could not go unacknowledged. Okay, now to the formalities. Good morning, everybody. Your Excellencies, fellow General Counsels, partners from the Global Forum for Law, Justice and Development, World Bank Group colleagues, we've got many distinguished justices, we've got the President of the World Bank, and of course the Nats fans. So welcome to everybody. This is my third LJD Week as General Counsel here at the World Bank, and the theme this year is, as you know, technology, rights and development. It's an important theme. When we were first discussing what the theme would be for this year, I was rather skeptical about technology because it's all over the place. And I thought, you know what, does anybody want to go to another technology conference? Apparently, yes, look at all of you here. And at first, I needed to really be persuaded that this was something that we needed to discuss in this forum. But it didn't take very long, actually, because it's such a huge issue, and there is such popular support for this to be the theme for this year, and it's great to see you all here today. And as Amir said, we have got some live streaming going on. We've got about 1,200 people here in DC. Many, many more will join us through social media channels as well. So it's going to be quite a big event. Please, if you are tweeting or blogging or whatever it is you're doing, hashtag LJDWeek2019 so we can follow you. We're going to have about 70 discussions lined up. It's going to be an exciting program. I hope you can attend as many sessions as possible. And so let me just say a little bit in these introductory remarks about technology and rights. I was looking this year at sort of Christmas gifts already. I like to be very well prepared. And I was sort of Googling, and I found that the most popular, one of the most popular Christmas gifts, DNA testing kits. Now, it does cause a few problems, you know, when you find out your daddy's not your daddy. Well, no, you may laugh. It's not very funny when you find that out, but you may laugh. But traditionally, in many, many countries, for example, inheritance is passed through the male line. And you tend to know who your mum is for sure, but you've only got your mum's word for who your dad is. So these DNA testing kits have proved to be very popular and also have given some unexpected results. But being the lawyer that I am, when I looked at the terms and conditions in these packages, you know, they're quite startling. We are giving away a lot of our data without even realizing it. And of course, I mean, they're very popular. They link you to long-lost family. They may tell you a bit of your medical history. But we are giving away a lot of our data. And data is a real commodity these days. It's information, and it's very, very valuable. But along with it has to go protection of rights, protection of privacy, etc. And how do these things match up? Because a lot of this is being commercialized. A lot of this is being digitalized. And how is this going to work for all of us, particularly those we serve in developing countries? So this is the challenge we throw out at this conference this week, to look at these issues in the context of development. The challenges are great, but our intellect is great as well. And I know there'll be a lot of discussion. I know there'll be a lot of interesting comments and hopefully some recommendations. And digitalization has been a driving force of much of the technologies and social change we see today. Its increased computing power, improved efficiency and innovation has ushered in a data-driven economy. And I think the lawyers have an important part to play in this. I'm not doing a job creation scheme, but it is very true, because we have to be there to protect the rights. We have to be there to recognize the dangers, and we have to be there to safeguard individuals everywhere. So there are challenges. We all want to progress. We all want to embrace this digital age, but how do we do that with protecting rights at the same time? So this data and technological revolution is not without its challenges. It has many, many pluses and many, many opportunities for us all, but we do have to do so with caution. So we are now going to start our sessions for this week. Thank you to everybody who has put this all together. It's a lot of hard work. Getting you all in this room looking like it's easy is not easy, I can tell you. So I'd like to thank the whole team that has put this together. And if we could just give them a little round of applause. I think that's quite enough for me for now. I would like to introduce my boss, World Bank Group President David Malpass. David joined us as World Bank Group President earlier this year, so this is his first LJD week. So I hope you'd give him a big round of applause as he comes to the stage to make introductory remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy. That wasn't nearly as much applause as the Nets. But I'm happy to be here for LJD week, and it's a hot topic. So I've got the easy job. I'm really just going to welcome you all here and encourage all your efforts. I want to thank the various groups that put all this together, and you heard how many meetings there are going to be. It's going to be a giant amount of work, and it's the overarching topic is rights, technology, and development. So focusing on that makes a lot of sense right from the get-go. It's critical in human rights and technology, legal responses to disruptive technology. Denny's, is Denny here? Hi, Den. And how to incorporate technology into the administration of justice. So as I've met now with a lot of world leaders over the last 6 months, and they're always in the underpinning of it is the rule of law being critical to getting innovation into broad-based growth, but also how does it interact with technology. I'm just back from India and Pakistan on Saturday, and that technology permeates their thinking about the evolution of rights and the rule of law. So it's very timely that this conference is focusing on this topic. Delivering good development outcomes requires us to understand the opportunities and challenges involved in disruptive technologies. Countries are struggling with that every day, and it's important to design the sound legal frameworks so that countries can take advantage of the opportunities and manage the potential risks. So thank you all for joining. I look forward to hearing the conclusions and the policy responses that we can get as we help countries face some of these challenges and also get benefits from them. Thanks very much.
Thank you, President Malpass and Dr. Okoro. And now we'd like to invite to the stage Vice President Denis Robitaille to kick off the second part of this keynote. Please welcome me in joining Denis Robitaille to the stage.
Good morning to all. I don't have a long speech. I just want to acknowledge the fact that the CAPS gave us a big win 2 years ago, and induced, I think, a good winning streak for Washington. So next in line is the Wizards and the Redskins, but we may have to wait a few years for that. So I'm really excited to be here this morning. I will moderate the panel, so I'm really excited also by this increased collaboration that we have with the legal department. This conference is absolutely right to look at human rights, how we protect them. Technology and innovation is moving super fast, and I think we need also on the regulation side to move super fast to enable, but also to deal with the potential challenges along the road. So we will have 2 7-minute talks from our guest speakers. Let me introduce them again. Peggy Hicks is the Director for Thematic Engagement, Special Procedures, and Right to Development in the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Topic will be technological innovation and the guarantee of rights. And we have also Hamad Ashkar, who is the founder and CEO of the Hult Prize Foundation. And his 7-minute talk will be about impact businesses, connecting rights and development. So I would like first to invite Peggy, and she will be followed by Ahmad after. Thank you.
Thank you all. I feel a bit left out coming over from Geneva, where we don't actually have baseball. So I feel like I've missed something big here in Washington. Thank you so much to the World Bank, to President Malpass, to Senior Vice President Sandy Okoro for welcoming me here today. And I, of course, bring the apologies from my boss, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, who had very much hoped to be with you. There's no need for me to remind this distinguished audience of the positive impact of digital technology, both for development and for human rights. These tools allow us to connect, to communicate, to investigate, to empower, and to deliver as never before, helping to drive progress towards each of the Sustainable Development Goals. At the same time, though, the risks of these new tech tools are pervasive and profound, influencing all spheres of our and our children's lives. With that stark dichotomy between the opportunities and perils of new technologies, we might be tempted to ask if we're standing at the edge of an amazing leap forward or at the precipice of a perilous cliff. The reality, though, is we're not on the edge. We've jumped already. And the only real question is the directionality of that jump. Are we heading toward a brick wall or a pillow soft landing? And whether we've got the right equipment to navigate that trip. In recent weeks, we've seen a surge of global protests in differing corners of our globe. The movements are diverse, as are their contexts, but there's a commonality among many of those events about enormous inequalities that have engendered deep-seated dissatisfaction and mistrust. This trend, to me, underscores the importance of the 2030 Agenda's commitment to achieve equality and to leave no one behind. But what will be the role of new technologies in achieving that objective? In a range of areas, we need to recognize that digital tools may actually deepen discrimination and widen inequalities. Indeed, in a variety of ways, they already are. The future health of large numbers of men and women, their suitability for jobs and bank loans, their eligibility for social protection benefits, and even the likelihood that they may commit crimes are currently being assessed by AI-driven tools. These systems are often drawn up without participation of the users themselves, creating the risk that the products will reflect the unconscious prejudice of their designers. And these realities are likely to be even more stark in low-income countries, where legal and institutional protections for those affected by digital technologies are likely to be weaker. Deploying technologies towards achievement of the SDGs involves, by definition, exposing the most vulnerable sections of humanity to risks that we have yet to resolve anywhere in the world. For example, digital identity programs, while holding promise for advancing access to services, must be accompanied by adequate safeguards, lest they inadvertently lead to further marginalization of the marginalized, violations of the right to privacy, and increased surveillance of political opponents. We face the reality that people may not be so much left behind as pushed behind by digitization. Fortunately, there are tools at hand that can cushion our landing and allow the promises of new technologies to be realized without exacerbating inequality. Ensuring that human dignity is at the core of how we develop, use, and govern digital technologies is a task that requires far more than a quick de-risking, some training programs, or episodic impact assessments. Codes of conduct, ethics statements, and voluntary compliance are not sufficient or robust enough for challenges of this scale. International human rights law, on the other hand, has unparalleled legitimacy, universal recognition, and scope that encompasses the full range of rights, economic, civil and political, social and cultural, that digital technologies affect. Human rights law is complementary to the ethical frameworks, enhancing moral understanding with a concrete legal standards and accountability mechanisms on which states and private sector can rely. There's another obstacle, though, in the path of that soft landing that we seek. The digital world requires governments to regulate in an arena for which they are, I'm sorry to say, in the large part ill-equipped. Failures by governments to respond to these new challenges are followed by rushed and often poorly designed responses. The pace and complexity of technological change requires innovative approaches to provide regulators with the support and expertise they desperately need. Companies with enormous influence and power set their own rules with varying degrees of commitment and success. Steering a safe course requires both governments and the private sector to step up to the challenges inherent in our digital reality. Most fundamentally, new technologies also have raised serious questions about the respective roles of government and of business. Here, too, human rights law can help. The UN principles on business and human rights clarify the responsibility of states and the private sector and outline what responsible business conduct looks like in practice in terms of the development, application, sale, and use of digital technologies. The guiding principles on business and human rights can help policymakers lay down human rights safeguards through a smart mix of regulation, incentives, and public policy tools, and develop workable methods for remedy and accountability when harm has occurred. There is an urgent need for greater investment in the systems needed to ensure that this rush to adapt new technologies is managed with the level of care appropriate given the far-ranging impacts they have. We are encouraged in our office by the growing intergovernmental efforts through the OECD, the Internet Governance Forum, and elsewhere, but much more needs to be done as well at both the national and the company level in both the Global South and North. On the company side, our office is launching a project that will engage stakeholders, including in developing countries, to use the guiding principles on business and human rights to provide advice to companies and policymakers on how to mitigate risks and best ensure that digital technology is a force for good by preventing and addressing related human rights harms. If we want to maximize the potential and risks and minimize the risks of digital technologies, we need more robust responses from governments with policies that incorporate a duty to protect the full range of human rights through laws and regulations. We need tech corporations to not only talk the talk, but walk the walk by recognizing the right of people to decide how their personal data is used and the right to a remedy when they suffer harm. We need human rights impact assessments to be conducted at every stage of the development and deployment of artificial intelligence systems, particularly when they may have a major or disproportionate impact on marginalized populations. At its best, the digital revolution will empower and connect people and generate vast new opportunities and well-being for everyone. At its worst, it has the ability to disempower, misinform, and marginalize, making our objective of leaving no one behind unachievable and exacerbating inequalities and strife. We have left the precipice, but this is an unending journey rather than a fall. We're in this for good, both literally and figuratively. Human rights are the guardrails that can cushion our path and keep us on a course for a brighter digital future for us all. Thank you.
We've now got Ahmed Ashkar coming to the stage.
How's everybody doing? Good? You guys enjoying yourselves at the World Bank? Legal policy, development, rights, technology. What do all these things mean? I'm going to talk to you guys today about impact, development, and entrepreneurship. By a show of hands, of course, we can't poll those watching online, but those of you here in the room, how many of you have the ability to influence or change laws in your own countries? I would hope that that's almost everybody in here. How many of you do that on a daily basis for the sake of development? I was sitting with my attorneys not less than 7 days ago. We were structuring a new finance vehicle for funding early stage entrepreneurship, which I've had the privilege to be involved in for the last 10 years of my life. And when coming up with the financial model, I asked them one simple question. Will this win us a Nobel Prize? What did my attorneys tell me? They laughed. They said, no, but we'll keep you out of jail. As influencers of law, policy, you need to use your power of influence not to copy, but to innovate, because that's what our world needs. I'm the founder and CEO of an organization called the Hult Prize Foundation. We spent the last decade training over 1 million young people on how to think differently about business, entrepreneurship, and impact, specifically in development. We believe that harnessing the power of youth is the most powerful means of development. More than 250,000 ideas, millions of entrepreneurs, 121 countries. There's nobody in the world that's seen more early stage enterprise. Probably nobody in this room that's experienced more of the financing which is coming through the World Bank, central banks, and seeing it on the ground. See, folks, I travel about 200 or so days a year, and I've been doing that for over a decade. And I see the implementation of your policy. And I'm going to give you a shining light of what's happening on the ground. First of all, let's understand what the levers are to development and change and understanding technology. Number one, inspiration. Number two, knowledge. Technology, and then everybody else that's watching here today influences the fourth pillar, which is outside of our control as financiers of entrepreneurship. We need to understand the role that you play in the ability for young people to actually be inspired and go the distance to create the technologies the world so desires. 22%, I'm not going to throw numbers at you, but this is one that's important. 22% of the world's youth unemployed. The better statistic is how many actually go to job and love their work and get to contribute to the impact economy. It's less than 3 out of 10. See, when we talk about entrepreneurship, there's a lot of, in emerging markets, this talk. Let's build accelerators. Let's build funds. Folks, you can't throw money into an ecosystem and expect roses to grow. The young kids in the emerging market where development is being impacted and the need for new rights and new technologies is most important, don't even have the motivation or confidence or knowledge to get out of bed and do anything other than what they've been instructed to do for years. Learn, learn, learn. Go seek a job. See, in the West, people like Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Uber, Elon Musk, we look at them and say, why can't we have those great entrepreneurs where we are in the emerging market? What you don't understand is each of these three, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of Harvard. He was predestined for success the minute he got into Harvard. Okay? Travis, the founder of Uber's family, again, very well dispositioned in society. Elon Musk, well, Elon Musk was part of the PayPal mafia. And if you look at the small chart that looks like a hub and spoke, you'll see the invention and founding of the entire Silicon Valley. Within 60 years, $2.1 trillion of market cap. And the bigger graph shows all of these great entrepreneurs that were already, and this is the important key, already on path for disruption and big entrepreneurship. This is how it works in the West. Stop importing the Western ideologies of entrepreneurship. They're different. We don't have Stanfords in Kenya. We don't have in Jordan. Outside of Aramex, we don't have any great business stories. Okay, why doesn't this work in development? Because you can't talk about technology if you don't talk about startups. But you can't talk about startups if you have the ingredients of what makes great startup economies correct. These are some of the problems. One, cultural norms. This is a picture of an entrepreneur, a woman farmer in Nigeria, unable, because it's culturally, policy-wise, unacceptable for her to be successful at what she does. And we have this kind of debate going on in the second picture you see here, unicorn or survival. The entrepreneurs I showed you before are trying to build billion-dollar companies. The entrepreneurs I work with on the ground are just trying to survive. But the World Bank and others have defined this category of opportunity entrepreneurship, where the funding goes to hit home runs. And if your funding looks like that in your country, your accelerators are just filled up with those same kids that are predestined for success. You are not doing anybody any favors, because we need to transform, not make the children of wealthy entrepreneurs more successful entrepreneurs. And third is policy innovation. You'll see Musana Carts, one of our startups actually out of Uganda. They were successful in changing the licensing of something as simple as a food cart. Believe me, being on the ground and seeing some of this financing available, none of that money would be awarded to a food cart franchise, micro franchise. So President Clinton, who's a great spokesman for the Hult Prize Foundation, said, and I'll summarize, the worst thing any youth can experience is waking up every single day and believing that their outlook is the same as it was today as it was yesterday. And that's what hundreds of millions of youth are facing every single day. The good news, there's organizations like the Hult Prize and a few examples I'll show you otherwise who have unlocked the code, and my hope is to share a couple of nuggets of information with you and then take the rest of this to the discussion of what actually works. So we've broken down this problem into a very systematic approach that begins with inspiring, then educating, then allowing young people to compete by putting what they learn into practice, and then accelerating those same kids who 3, 6, 9, 12 months ago had no idea they could be entrepreneurs. And then, of course, providing seed funding. Our seed funding prize is the largest prize in the world for early stage social enterprise. It's $1 million. We also have other funding mechanisms that we have that come in through structures like the World Bank and central banks around the world. And finally, scale. So here's a couple of quick examples of the bright side of what you can build entrepreneurship. This is one of our portfolio companies, Falafel Inc. Through the use of technology, we've been able to feed refugees by the tune of 250,000 refugees in a tech partnership through the World Food Program by selling something as simple as falafel. In Bangladesh, one of our startups, our final 6 startups this year, introduced a company called Safewheel. This required so much policy and law innovation that we believed in a new era of business. What does Safewheel do? Safewheel targets rural medical response in Bangladesh, where currently there's one ambulance serving 88,000 people. Safewheel developed a new and exciting technology. Again, when we talk about technology, we don't have to talk about some algorithm. You can have low tech, okay? High touch. They developed a $2,800 ambulance that's designed to go into places where no other ambulance can go. Here's the best part, folks. These enterprises in development can be profitable. These ambulances have a 6-month repayment, becoming profitable in literally the 181st day. This is our trajectory. 18,000 youth employed, 6 million patients within the next 5 years. Roshni rides, Pakistan. How many of you thought you could build a $100 million business in Arangi town? One of the largest refugee camps or slums, whatever you want to call them in the world. We did with Roshni rides. They won the Hult Prize in 2016. They get $1 million check. We become the largest early stage investor in all of Pakistan. Very simple carpooling service for women. Sign up, select, match, subscribe. In less than 3 years, we do 20,000 rides a month. We're making $24,000 of revenue, and we're operating in the most unlikely places you would operate a business. And again, folks, just in 3 years, we've gone from an idea to being funded to in the market. We'll impact 1 million people in the next 5 years and make $33 million in profit. This is my last example for you, BooPass, Kenya. How many of you have ridden the Kenya Railway? Anybody in here? A couple people in the back. If you did that, your ticket was booked through BooPass. We run all the back end for the Kenya Railway, making transport and ticketing possible. This company won the Hult Prize in 2015. Very simple, offline SMS booking. Again, we worked with, if you look back in this picture, I want to just recognize Bob Collymore. He passed away this past year, was a huge supporter, CEO of Safaricom. He made the vision of BooPass come to life, where through offline text, we're able to do bookings. Finally, I'll give you guys some advice and I'll wrap up. What are the 3 things that we've identified can be very, very influential for you as policymakers? 1, cultural mindset and de-risk intervention early. We choose to do it at the university level, but you can do it in other places. 2, lead investment. You must, there's been 59 new reforms on government policy this year alone on how to make it easier for central banks to guarantee or backstop losses of commercial banks to lend money. Okay, we must make leading easier, and we must work on brand new laws. If we look at Tunisia, Tunisia has the Startup Reform Act, a powerful law reform. In Lebanon, they did the same thing. Hult Prize ended up getting a $250,000 startup prize based on a policy reform. So I'll leave you with that. I think I don't want to take up other time from we've got a great panel. And if you want to learn more, you can follow us. You can follow me personally at Mayor of Impact on Instagram. But for everybody, I really encourage you to think about not how you can be risk averse, but how you can win that Nobel Prize in the decisions that you make. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to invite Peggy and Sandy. I'm told we have 2,000 people online. So thank you very much for the inspiring speech. Sandy, the first question goes to you. What are your key takeaways from these 2 presentations?
Well, firstly, I would like to thank Peggy and Ahmed for 2 very inspiring and quite thrilling lightning talks. There was so much in each of them that I hadn't heard before put in quite the same way. And I think with Peggy's one, what really sort of stood out to me, that codes of conduct, some of the things that we're doing are just not going to be enough. We need a different approach to protect the rights when it comes to our data and the digital world, and the idea that international human rights has a part to play within this and needs to be looked at in that context is a really interesting perspective. And that idea came across very clearly about marginalization, that no one should be left behind. And that is something that does concern me as a lawyer in development, is that things can push ahead so quickly, you leave so many behind at the same time and they don't catch up, particularly women, because they're already behind as it is, and they'll end up further behind. So how do we ensure that everybody catches up at the same time? Because there's so many pluses as well, and that, you know, that we have a right to our personal data and we have a right to ensure that it is protected. At the same time, it doesn't need to be used to further the world, and how do you get that balance? But I love that leave no one behind was the key sort of message from all of this. With Ahmed's talk, the need for innovation really came across. That you always started with that, the inspiration, the innovation piece first. And I think that's really important. Sometimes we forget that. You know, how are we going to win this Nobel Prize? How are we going to think outside the box and do something different to the way that we've always done things before? And that inspire, educate, compete, accelerate, fund, and scale was such a sort of logical progression, but not one you'd necessarily think of in that order. If you were given the words and put them in an order, many people would put them in a different order, and they may put educate first, but you didn't. And I thought that was interesting, because where are these entrepreneurs, this next generation of great thinkers going to come from? Without the inspiration that they can see. So, I mean, that was something that really struck me, that if you look at that order, which order would you put things in? And the idea can be low tech, and we've done a few low tech things as well at the World Bank that have been hugely successful. And I'll just round up with this. I went to see in one of our countries, in Tanzania, a mobile court. Low tech, a bit like the ambulance, because this phrase, you go to court, that's always been, you go to court, not the court comes to you. But if you're in rural areas, getting to court can be very expensive, it can take days, and it could almost take a month's salary rather, to get there. But if a mobile court you can book through an app can come to your village once a week or once a month or whatever it is that's required, and you can get justice dispensed there by a magistrate and a van, that is low tech, but has such a huge impact. So I do want to stress that it doesn't all have to be high tech as well. Low tech can have and I'm much more low tech. Yeah. Me, I like that. So that's those were my takeaways.
Thank you, Sandy. I really like the two presentations, because I think they are putting on the table the two biggest challenges that we have, and innovation, technology is moving so fast. And at the same time, we need to protect human rights. So this is a big challenge, and we need to accelerate, in my view, the interaction between the innovators and the regulators. Regulators have to catch up, in my view. But the High Commissioner said, I don't know when, but recently, that we need to have the right mixtures of measure to regulate the technology. I would say also to help innovation. So what do you think is the role of the lawyers in this area? What is the right mixture? So let's start with you, Peggy. What is the role of the lawyers in that picture?
Great. Thanks, Denny. And you know, it's interesting, because as the human rights person in the room, you're not always necessarily the most welcome guest at the party, let me put it that way. But part of what we really wanted to emphasize, pulling back to Sandy's point, is the extent to which human rights is actually, in this instance, a really helpful tool. If you look at what's happening on something like artificial intelligence, you know, there are daily releases of new sets of ethical guidelines and standards for development of AI. But they don't have necessarily that common foundation and base that allows them to extend across cultural contexts, across different sets of values and ideas. We have that within the universal human rights framework that's already been agreed by countries across the globe. So when we look at that smart mix of regulation, what we're saying is bring in those standards, bring in those ideas in how we do it. One of our concerns is that there's a lot that's happening at the company level, so-called company law, where a lot of these really tough issues are being agreed there. And the push for us is not to displace that entirely, but to make sure that we do things both at the government level, at the national level, and at the industry-wide level that will make sure that what's being developed is coherent and rights-respecting across the board. So it's not enough to either do things within the broad new frameworks like the OECD Observatory or through the Internet Governance Forum. We need to find ways to support what's happening at the national level, where national governments are saying, you know, it is hard to regulate in this new space. It's, as you said, it moves so quickly. How do we make sure that we're actually asking the right questions and moving quickly enough to keep up with technological changes? And we need new bodies, new institutions to provide the expertise and support and skills necessary to regulate in that space. So how we get that to happen globally at scale is one of the big challenges. And I've just come back from a conference where we were looking at the role of the cities in this as well. And some cities have obviously had, you know, very interesting experiments, like Toronto with its Sidewalk Labs project, looking at how the city can actually play a cutting-edge role in helping us resolve some of the most difficult issues with new technologies. So I think we need more support, and that's part of what we mean by that smart mix of regulation looking forward.
Okay, good. Ahmed, do you?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'm lapelled up on your mic. So I love this topic. I spent years as an investment banker and then got into the impact and development space, kind of backwards looking in. And I do a lot of neat things locally in DC. One of them is I'm a faculty member at ILI, where I get to meet, you know, lawyers, chief justices, members of government all around the world. And what always, I don't say bothers, more surprises me, is these are the lawmakers. These are the ones who have the influence. But yet they conform in the development space to the rules and the policy which has been presented to them. And they always seem to think they have to stay in this box. See, the private sector doesn't operate this way. The private sector puts the box in the field and then builds the rules around it. And it's time for that to change. We need to be leaders, especially on the law side. You know, and I'll give you a real good deal story. I was with a monarchy in the Middle East. I was with the First Lady, and she's in distraught because there's this fund which has been structured as a debt fund, and quite large, multi-$100-million fund. And she's asking me how to think creatively about how to deploy some of that money, because it's been designed to go into MFIs. And I said to her, just change the law. And she said, yeah, actually, that's probably easier, because you've got $100 million sitting on the sideline when it should go into development. So let's not be subject to laws that were put in place by the private sector. We're the development sector, and we have to be more innovative. And that's my perspective.
Okay, thank you. Sandy, maybe you can tell us if you agree with this point for Ahmed, that we need to change our mindset on the regulation side. So how do you think we make this happen? What needs to happen to have a better dialogue between the regulator, the lawyers, and the innovators?
Okay, let me start with a bit of poetry on that one. Samuel Taylor Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner has a very famous line that says, water, water everywhere and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. If I was going to rewrite those two lines, it's technology, technology everywhere, and all the world did shrink, technology, technology everywhere, and privacy on the brink. And I think that lawyers have an important part to play, but not as blockers, okay? Because if you look at the way we now stream music and we stream videos, way back when lawyers would have told you can't do that because of intellectual property rights. It's just a no-no. I think our lives personally are much better for it. But so we have to be innovative as well, is what I'm saying as lawyers, within the bounds of what we understand and the law evolves as well. Because this is an important thing. The law needs to evolve with the way humanity is evolving. But back to Peggy's point, not leaving people behind in the process. And I think we're in an unprecedented time where certainly technology is evolving really fast and the laws just aren't keeping up. And we as lawyers do struggle somewhat with that, but we do have to be, I think, innovative. We do have to look at different ways of doing things, but also with the protection hat on, I think. And I used to be in the private sector as well, and regulation would be coming everywhere at us. And we had to be innovative around this because it was virtually impossible to comply with every piece of regulation around the world if you wanted to be a global organization. So you really had to, as a lawyer and as a compliance person, you know, have a different mindset when you were advising your clients. Not yes and no, not black and white, but more a risk-based approach, and understanding that if you want to achieve X, you are going to have to take Y risk. You cannot achieve X and take zero risk. That's not the way I think the world works. So we have many challenges, but as lawyers, I think, you know, now's our time. We play a really interesting role, and I think every single lawyer, no matter what your background is, really should brush up on their human rights, because this comes into nearly everything that we do in terms of an approach to looking at things, because this rights-based approach is going to be crucial when we are looking at many of these challenges ahead.
Good, thank you. My last question before we go to the questions from the audience and people online. So, Ahmed, you basically mentioned the transformation nature of innovation in helping the most vulnerable. So, what are the top priority in terms of using technology for helping the, you know, the vulnerables in the world?
Yeah, so I think being human-centered in our design is the most critical. Again, there's a lot of Western innovation which is taking place for developing markets, and a lot of it is wrong, and there's not a product market fit. In development, product market fit simply means that your business offering has a net human impact within its design. The second thing that, again, all of our startups within Hult Prize look to doing is developing products which are profitable. Yeah. And we don't mean profitable at an expense of being impact-centered. We actually mean you make money in building enterprise, and with every dollar of revenue you generate, there's a net impact on humanity, on social issues, or even, in fact, environmental issues. And by doing that, you're building a business that has the ability to scale. So you're human-centered, you're profit-minded in that you have the ability to make profit and scale. Again, this is not generate revenue, then donate some of the revenue. This is a net human impact. And third is you have the ability from a growth perspective to actually bring about change. And again, you know, from our perspective, because we're continuing to push on large transformation. Remember, transformational is not this thing that you do just to provide a meal for a day. It's to be able to provide a new life for somebody. So.
Peggy, you have any comments on this?
I just wanted to add in, I mean, there's so many ways that innovation and technologies can actually reach people more easily, give them better services. But the one point I wanted to leave this audience with is about how they can change how we all work. The ways in which we can use new technologies to involve people in the decisions about their own lives in a different way. I know that that is a commitment by the World Bank and by all of us, but the reality is the tools that we've had to do that have often been lacking. And so we find both technology being developed, but programs being designed and then implemented without really getting the feedback and addressing the needs that people have and the problems that develop in the implementation in the ways that we could. Technology can really help us to do much better in allowing people to participate actively and in an informed way in the decisions that most affect their lives, and allow them to look for remedy when those decisions go awry as well. So that key element of allowing people their own voice in the work that we do is really crucial, I think.
Sandy, I have a question online from you here. What role do the World Bank could play in modernizing the concept of rights in the internet era?
Oh, what a question. Well, I think there is a very important role for us to play. David mentioned it as well in his opening speech, and he's mentioned it many times since he's been at the bank, which is we need to do more work in the access to justice and legal reform area than we currently do. Because as you can see, there's a real need for it alongside everything else that's happening. You can't really separate out those two things. So I think that's one thing that the World Bank can do, which is work very closely with its client countries to help them achieve the legal reform that they need to so that we can see that the bank reaches its twin goals of alleviating poverty and boosting shared prosperity. Because one of the interesting stats Ahmed said was, what was it? Was it 22% of youth in the world are unemployed? That's really high. And that's a real problem. And we're not going to hit one of our twin goals of alleviating poverty if we don't tackle that. So I think along with that, we're going to have to look at the judicial reform, access to justice, all of those sorts of issues alongside it. So that's where I think the bank can really help. But also, we definitely have the technical expertise in many of the projects and in many of the countries that we're in to help with this technological revolution. And we probably need to make sure this is embedded in many of the projects that we look at, and make sure this, again, we don't leave anybody behind. And that piece, I think we can really tackle, because we're very well placed to tackle that, along with the environmental and social safeguards work that we do. That's very important, because that's part of that, and we work with our client countries to ensure that too. So I think those are the three areas we can really work on to achieve this.
And a quick, tough follow-up. Do you think we are doing this fast enough?
You know, you can always be faster. You can always be faster. But I think in order to do it, you don't want to just do it fast. You want to do it right.
Yeah.
And sometimes doing it right can take more time.
Good answer. Yeah, of course. Ahmed, I have a question here from one participant. You talked about scale-up financing, but how can we make it not only diverse but more inclusive? How can this scale-up could be more inclusive?
Yeah, I think you can look at that from a couple of angles, but inclusive finance and inclusive in terms of the impact. So I think a lot of challenges that entrepreneurs have in moving an idea to mass scale is those that they are able to bring along with them. And we talk about, and we've said it, no one left behind. I think a lot of times people think of that as pushing people from behind. I think the perspective should be pulling the guys in front of them to pull them up, because years ago when we launched the Hult Prize, we focused on the bottom of the economic pyramid. And we said, if we want to change the world, we're going to go after those making $2 to $5 a day. What we realized is we should leave that work for the development, the true development, relief organizations, agencies, et cetera, because if we wanted to have radical, inclusive impact, we needed to focus very much on those that were just one tier above to be able to pull them. And I think transformational growth and inclusiveness is built if you build your product the right way. And as Peggy said, with your community first. Don't build your product in the West and go deploy it. Go into the field. And at Hult, we say do learn and then do, and it gives you the ability to make sure that you're building constantly a correct product, which is market aligned, and inclusivity should not be an issue.
Thank you.
Can
you
I,
want to add?
Yeah, just the world, because of technology, the world is much smaller than it ever was in terms of, not geographically, obviously, but in terms of reach. And I think for all of us, whatever organisation we are, we have to work together. That's the difference. No more sort of siloed, where development, and this is private sector, this is a relief organisation. We have to intersect with each other and work together, because we're really complementary services here, and that's where I think the real strength will be, is that, you know, where maybe the bank finishes and it can do no more is where somebody else picks up, but working together to make sure that that happens, I think would be very productive.
I have a last question here, very popular online. How can you yourself contribute to this in your respective role, to this basically this merger of the law, the regulation, following innovation, helping innovation? So what can you do specifically yourself?
Was to me?
All of you.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Peggy. You want to start?
Peggy, start.
Well, it's a tough one. We're working very hard, I think, to try to find ways to use the position that we have within this ecosystem to inform and help governments and companies that want to figure out how to use the human rights framework in a way that makes sense. One of the things that we hear a lot is from the tech companies, yeah, the guiding principles on business and human rights are good. We know how they apply in the apparel industry. We know how they apply in the extractives, but they're not really designed for these tech questions, and we need something new. Well, the reality is, we're just talking about the time frames. We don't have time to create a whole new framework just for the tech side. We actually have to use what we have and then fill in where we might need to if it doesn't actually help us get where we need to get to. So trying to find ways to work with companies and governments to use the existing standards to answer some of these tough questions and do it quickly, but in the right manner, I think is one of the key ways that myself and our office can contribute in this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, again, I love using deal stories. I'm on the board of a great organization called ANERA. And ANERA is a Palestinian refugee relief organization, which is US-based, operating in Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. And they just hired a new CEO, Sean Carroll, who came over from USAID. And I think the best thing you can do as an individual is not rely on anyone else but yourself first. And what he did at ANERA was say, look, young Palestinians should be learning tech. And after grant requests that couldn't get it done, ANERA went in and built a boot camp to train young Palestinian kids on how to be trained up with these coding skills. And literally, those of you that are familiar with the Middle East, you're talking about 1 million new jobs forecasted just in Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon in the next 5 years. So 16-week program gets developed, piloted through, again, just, you know, donor hustling, no government support, et cetera. Went into Jordan, ran the program, had 7 pilot students. 100% of them got jobs after 16 weeks. Went from being unemployed to employed. Guess what happens next? You know, the government hops on, one country, USAID hops, I mean, you know, and the stories continue. And I think oftentimes we get caught up in trying to raise that money first, trying to find the right partners first. If you believe very strongly in an idea that you think can have radical impact and transformation, then, you know, do it.
Yep.
So.
Thank you. Andy?
Well, one particular thing that, not on my own, but I think with the bank that we can do is use our convening power, because the bank has a huge amount of muscle in that sense. Look at everybody here today and the topic we're talking about. And I think using that convening power to have conversations like this and more is what I feel that I can contribute to this space. Because even today, even this morning, people will be inspired, they'll have ideas, they'll have conversations with others, and things will happen. This has happened at every LJD week I have been at, and people have come come back and said, I spoke to so-and-so and we started this up and it has changed lives. So I think that's where I feel that the contribution can be made. Not just talking for the sake of it, but actually forming alliances, ideas and innovation. Because that's not to be underestimated. And Ahmed's point about the inspiration being the start, well, it's conversations like this and meetings like this that start that, because just today from Peggy and Ahmed, I've heard things I have not heard before put in that context. So I'm inspired to think of other things. So that's what I think my team, my contribution, the bank's contribution could be.
Yeah, and your contribution is also to sit here and accepting to come and speak. And I think you are setting up the stage for this week's discussion, which is, as we can see, highly needed in this world. I mean, the fact to have the regulators, the lawyers, and the innovators to work together, to understand each other, also to understand that we need to take care of human rights, and at the same time promote innovation. So we need to we need to wrap up this panel. So I would like to say a big thank you to our three panelists, and also to the organizer and to all of you, the participants. So I invite you to participate very highly in this week of events and to contribute to this very important topic. So thank you very much.